Hi, I'm Diane Macedo. Let's get right to our top story. Cross-examination of former National Enquirer publisher David Pecker has resumed in the criminal hush money trial against former President Trump. So far, Pecker has testified to being part of a scheme to help bury embarrassing stories that Trump feared could hurt his 2016 presidential campaign. ABC News executive editorial producer John Santucci joins me now, along with criminal defense attorney and former prosecutor Bernardo Villalona. John, what's the latest from the courtroom?
So right now we are back in cross-examination of David Pecker. So Donald Trump's team is up there asking him questions right now, walking through a little bit, actually, which is fascinating, of the 2015 presidential campaign, so the beginning of the 2016 campaign, focusing on a lot of Donald Trump's opponents at that time, Marco Rubio, Ted Cruz. And one of the things that's been very interesting going through the notes from our team in court right now, Diane, is that they're asking David Pecker about stories that were published by the National Enquirer about those opponents of Donald Trump. And one of the things that the defense team is asking is saying, look, did you do these stories because Donald Trump told you to? Would you have done them if you had spoken to him or not? You know, where was your head at? And he says very clearly, I would have done them regardless whether or not I spoke to Donald Trump. And in one case, he talks about a story that, you know, was a headline that prosecutors showed involving Ben Carson. And he said, well, wait a second. Yes, but it was a recycled story. Another outlet published it first. I followed them. There wasn't a conversation there I had about Donald Trump. So a little bit of the minutia right now about the business of the National Enquirer, if you will, but nevertheless fascinating.
Bernardo, Pecker also testified yesterday to killing stories or using them as leverage with other public figures, including Tiger Woods and Rahm Emanuel. How critical is it for the defense to try to show that this was a widespread practice and not just something done for Donald Trump?
Well, with the defense going through this strategy, they're trying to show that, look, this is widespread. It's nothing special to Donald Trump. So I wasn't doing any favors for Donald Trump. Donald Trump didn't have much to gain out of this. I wasn't acting at the direction of Donald Trump, but more of this is something that I was doing in common with other people as well. So this is important in terms of the charges that he's facing of falsifying business records, because if you can't show that there's a gain, some kind of campaign finance interest to it, then it's not criminal. So that's how the defense is attacking David Pecker, but I don't think they're being much successful with it.
And, John, we heard Trump wish his wife Melania a happy birthday before going into court today. It's hard to ignore how much of this case revolves around alleged affairs, which he denies. But Melania also famously left the White House for Mar-a-Lago when these allegations against him first came out. So what are you hearing from Trump's inner circle about how this is all affecting him right now?
It's embarrassing. I mean, that's really the word I hear repeatedly from top aides and allies to the former president. This is stories that he did not want out there years ago. I remember being on the phone with senior aides when both Karen McDougal and Stormy Daniels eventually did tell their stories in very extensive, lengthy sit-down interviews with two media outlets. And I remember one aide at the time, close to Melania Trump, I asked the person, I said, is she watching this? They said, don't know, can't approach her. Like, that's how much it was affecting the family in real time. As you know, I'm sitting here rejogging my brain to years ago, and it's just fascinating to think about how much of an impact that had then. And it's really reopening old wounds, if you will, the fact that we are here in court today. And I also think in some ways, you know, it's nice that he's wishing Melania a happy birthday, but nevertheless a little odd given the setting and the subject matter.
Bernardo, could the defense use that to their advantage? Could they look back at how these stories going public affected the family and try to point to that as Donald Trump's motive for trying to keep them silent?
Well, that's a strategy that they're trying to go with. But the problem is when talking to David Pecker, nothing having to deal with Donald Trump's family came up. That wasn't part of the conversation, that he needed to protect his family from learning this information. So they're going to have to counter that with the lack of information, of evidence out there of him saying that I need to protect Melania from hearing these devastating accusations.
John, yesterday Pecker also described how he came to first learn about Stormy Daniels and her story, how he encouraged Michael Cohen to pay her directly, why he decided not to kill her story directly the way he did with some of these others. What stood out to you from that testimony, and how do you think the defense is going to respond to that?
It's interesting. There was a phrase from David Pecker that just caught my attention. It was, I'm not a bank. Because remember, the Stormy Daniels story came right around the same time they were also dealing with Karen McDougal. And David Pecker testified that Trump's team had claimed he'd be reimbursed for that. He was never reimbursed for that payment. So then, to then get, if you will, hit up again to spend another 6 figures to catch and kill another story, Pecker basically said, no, guys, I'm not doing this one. You have to do it. So I think any bit about those conversations as they further get into the minutia of what happened there and why it went this way instead of that way. And look, it could be, as we were just talking about, the reason Trump's stepping up to do it. You know, the defense can say, well, you know, he was going to do it for us, but we just didn't want to, you know, cause harm to Melania or others, so that's why we did it. But again, where they do have a very big problem here, if you will, is just that timeline, it coming literally weeks before the 2016 election.
All right, John Santucci, Bernardo Villalona, thank you both, and we will be following this case all day long. We'll bring you the latest right here on ABC News Live.